Entertainment presents the return of the You Name It Tour. Pastor Shirley Caesar headlines this dynamic encore. Saturday, November 12th at the Sumter County Civic Center. Also featuring the Canton Spirituals. We didn't have much. Those Mississippi boys are coming. But the Lord been good to me. Doc McKenzie and the Highlights. I wanna live so God can use me anywhere. The Gospel Legend and Roy and the Revelation. The return of the You Name It Tour. Saturday, November 12th at the Sumter County Civic Center. Doors open at 2. Program begins 3:45. Platinum, VIP, and advanced tickets available. Get them at Eventbrite. Imports limited in Sumter. House Musica and Undisputed Barbershop. For info, call 803-846-9872.
Well, good evening, everyone. This is Loretta Coleman. We welcome you to Loretta Coleman Live, and we certainly hope that you're prepared to enjoy this show. We have a lot that we're going to talk about. We're going to be talking with Miss Lisa Ells. She is the superintendent, running for the superintendent of education for the state of South Carolina. Well, maybe I just spoke it into existence. She is the superintendent of education. But we welcome you. We have a lot of questions. Let's say good evening to some of you before we begin. Miss Ernice Elliott, Miss Latrice Davenport, Miss Brenda Bridget, how you doing? Valicia Sumter, how you doing? Eartha Singleton, how are you? Edwina Jones, how you doing? Irma Benjamin, how are you? Lord, there's so many. Miss McClary, how you doing? Miss Benny Allen, how you doing? Mr. Benny Allen, how you doing? If you have questions, hey, Miss Sandra Sumter, if you have questions, please be patient because we want you to ask her questions. We want you to interact with her, and we will put it up on the screen and she'll be reading it as well. And let's just begin with her right now. How you doing?
Hi, fine. How are you doing? Thank you for having me on your wonderful show.
Well, thank you. We're excited about having you on, and we want everybody to know, who is Lisa Ells? Who is she? What plans do she have for our children, our grandchildren, our nieces, our nephews? What can you do different that others have not done? What are some of your plans? We're going to talk about it all. We're going to talk about it all because we want people to go out to the polls and we want them to vote for you in full force.
That sounds wonderful. I look forward to the conversation.
Okay, well, just tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do? What have you done? And so forth.
Okay. My name is Lisa Ells. I was born and raised here in Columbia, South Carolina. I am in my 22nd year of teaching. I have worked in 3 school districts: Fairfield County, Richland School District 1, and Richland School District 2. In 4 schools, I've taught all levels of English, speech, lots of electives. I've taught leadership. I have been an instructional coach for teachers, and I'm currently the director of student activities at Blythewood High School. And that role is a hybrid role where I'm responsible for everything that is non-academic and non-athletic. So that is student orientation, that is community service, that is spirit weeks, prom, graduation. I like to say it's all the fun parts of school that students get excited about. And through that, I work with students to develop their leadership and service skills. And so I'm still directly working with students half the day, and I just love the job. 4.5 years ago, I started a closed Facebook group called SC for Ed with the goal of building a community for teachers in South Carolina to get together and, problem solve, collaborate, share ideas, talk through some things. And that turned into a grassroots advocacy movement to work to place a high quality teacher in every classroom in South Carolina. And we do, worked on that through in increasing teacher salaries, improving working conditions, and then, of course, addressing school funding. And that is what has led me here to run for office. I really have fought for teachers and for students for the last 4 years and felt like my voice was not being heard as much as it should have been. And so I, decided to run for office to hopefully put that teacher voice up at the policy level. I have 2 master's degrees. One is a master's of science from Clemson University, and the other is a master's of arts from Columbia College. So that is my background, but I'm a teacher at heart. I have no intention of continuing in politics after this. I just enjoy working with students so much.
In the past 22 years, you've seen a lot. What are some of the things you've seen that you like to change?
Well, I've seen, the loss of great teachers in from the classroom. I've seen, us move away from really focused on preparing our students for life after K through 12 and more about testing our students, in tests that are not really going to help them be successful. Because of that high stakes testing, we have moved away from sort of developing what I call, character traits, or those career skills like critical thinking and problem solving and communication. We really have had to move away from that. And so that has really, I think, hurt students in the sense of not being able to really work through real life problems. I think about the increase of social media and how that has really changed the landscape of students. But I think at the end of it all, the students are the same in my 22 years of teaching, right? It's the world that has changed around them. And I just don't feel like our educational system has kept up with the changes in the world. When we talk about preparing students for after K through 12, we're really preparing them for jobs that don't even exist yet. Who knew that 20 years ago, logistics supply chain was going to be a big job, or, I hate to say it, but social, media influencer, like those jobs we had no idea were going to exist. And yet they're here. And so we really are, need to prepare them for jobs that we haven't even thought of yet.
What are some of the challenges that you see that you would like to change?
I think that teachers really are struggling with just overwork, in terms of higher class sizes. When you have big class sizes, you're dealing with, lots of extra work. We have placed more and more responsibilities on our teachers to provide successful opportunities for our students, but we haven't given them the support to do that. Our schools, particularly our public schools, deal with much more than just academic learning, right? When you look at the fact that in South Carolina, a fifth of our students are, live in poverty. The schools are responsible for 2 of their 3 meals every day. They're responsible for transporting them to and from school. They're responsible for, making sure that they are in a good place mentally and socially. And so what that has led to is more and more responsibility on the schools and the teachers, but the state has not provided those supports in terms of funding to help with mental health, to help with school nurses, to help with social workers, and has also not provided the academic supports that teachers need in terms of time to plan, time to go through, what is best for their students. I think about, when we talk about how education has changed, I grew up in a time, I like to think not so long ago, but it's getting further and further away.
Yes.
Where, the students in your class, they sat in straight rows and the teacher stood at the head of the class and, either lectured or talked or discussed or whatever. And teaching is very different. It's much more individualized to students. It's much more choice given, where you're not giving all of the students in your class the same assignment necessarily. And so because of that, teachers need a lot more time to be able to develop all of those different lessons and supports, but also time to really get to know their students and meet the needs of them on that individual basis. And so, I think more and more our students and our teachers in our schools have had to do so much more with less and less support.
How many students does a teacher have in the average class?
Well, it really depends on where you are in the state. I live in a district and work in a district where your K through or your, early grades are in, upwards of 1 to 25, 30. I met a math teacher up in, I think, Lawrence County, sort of up in the upstate, where he was in a classroom with 25 students teaching math. And then there was a classroom next door with a substitute teacher and another 25 students that he was being projected into. So they were watching him online next door, but he was still responsible for those 50 students, their learning and grading and all of that. And that was just one of his classes. The state has a state law that limits class sizes, but they have waived it and said, oh, districts, you don't need to follow it, since 2008. And so we've seen class sizes upwards of 30, 35, just getting bigger and bigger. And it just hurts the students because they're not able to get that individual attention.
What can we as a community do to help the schools more?
Well, I'm going to say first and foremost, because we're in election season, vote. Pay attention to, who, and I think, people I have learned through this political campaigning that less people tend to show up for midterms because it's not a presidential election, but more and more of our daily life decisions are made by the people that we're voting for, either now if you've early voted or November 8th. When you think about your South Carolina House member or your local school boards. And so first and foremost, pay attention to who's running for office and vote for the one that best aligns with, what you believe. I think that we're, school boards, as a teacher, school boards have a direct influence on what my classroom looks like. And we have said for years with SC for Ed, a teacher's working conditions are a student's learning conditions. So you want to make sure that that student has the best learning conditions possible. So look at who you're voting for. I think also, through my 22 years, and I've worked at mostly high school, but some middle school, we've seen less and less families help in the schools. And so I think about, parent volunteers, all of those things. And I don't think, that it's necessarily on purpose. I think we live in a very different age where it is harder to make $1 than it, was before. But just having that that family involvement, inviting parents in and having them be part of the conversation, coming in and, volunteering at your elementary school and, sitting in the cafeteria with your children, your grandchildren, or your, niece or nephew. And then also the easiest thing for me is have conversations with your students that are in public schools. Like that is the best way to figure out what is going on and how you can best support your students. And they really, they'll open up once you start asking those questions. I remember, my mom always saying, how was school? And, fine. What'd you learn? Nothing. But that's not the questions you ask. You say, what did you learn? Or what was your favorite part of school? Or, those sort of things. And having those conversations are so important to make sure that you know what's going on, because the reality is a lot of the issues that we're hearing people say are going on in schools are not actually going on in schools. And the best way to figure that out is by talking to the students that are in the schools.
Wow. Now, I hope that I'm politically correct. This question I'm getting ready to ask. Your opponent don't have the experience or the education that you have. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is correct.
So if she does not have that, how do she expect to accomplish all the things that we need in the school system? How is that going to be possible?
I mean, I think that is a question that you'd have to ask her. I think, this particular race is, you could not get two different candidates running in terms of our ideologies, in terms of what we believe, in terms of our experience. We are on two opposite sides of the coin. And so to me, it's an easy race to decide who, which way you want public education to go. If you believe in a strong public education system and you want that public education system improved, then you vote for me. If you are okay with your public tax dollars going to private schools that don't have the same accountability, don't have the same transparency, don't have to let in any student, then you need to vote for my opponent. And I think that it's one of those races where it's just two different belief systems, and which belief system the majority of South Carolinians are going to vote for. I guess we'll see after November 8th. I'm hoping it's my belief system, because I believe in public education. I believe that when we lift up all of our students, we improve South Carolina and we give those students access to a high quality education. It opens up so many doors for them to make their lives better, but also make our state better.
What if of all the things that you've seen, all the different things that's going on, the shooting, the shortage of teachers, some of the kids being disobedient, not all, because we have some good kids. What is some of the first things that you would do to help in those three situations?
So I think, first and foremost, all of those, the school safety, the student discipline issues, those are all secondary issues if you don't have adults in the school building, right? Mm-hmm. So my goal in first and foremost is to increase teacher recruitment and retention. Let's get our adults. And when I talk about adults, I'm talking about those adults who see children daily. So that includes bus drivers, that includes instructional assistants, that includes cafeteria workers, any of those people that come into contact with students. Because if you look across South Carolina right now, I think the latest statistic is that we've got 1,100 classrooms without a teacher. Wow. So if you have 1,100 classrooms without a teacher, you can't even begin to address student discipline. You can't even begin to address school safety, because all of that is dependent on that adult being in the room. And when we look at, the lack of teachers, our students with special needs are doubly impacted, because that group of teachers has left, I think statistic was 25% more special ed teachers than any other content. Those students are dealing with even, bigger class sizes, and we talk about how much they need that individual attention. And so you really have to address that problem first. In terms of school safety, people tend to not like my answer because it's not here's the magic bullet that's going to fix that. School safety is wrapped up in so many different things. I talk about how it's a spider web, right? You pull this part of the web and all of this moves. So when we're talking about school safety, again, we've got to talk about those adults being present. So that's first and foremost. You've got to talk about your access to smaller class sizes for those adults to be able to build those relationships, to recognize when a student is in stress or is in, high anxiety movement. You've got to put those academic supports in place, because when you look at the profile of school shooters, it tends to be people who felt alienated in school. They weren't successful academically, all of those sort of ostracized. You've got to put that mental health in place. You've got to put that social emotional learning where students understand what they're feeling and how to deal with that appropriately. You've got to improve or increase funding for school buildings. You've got to make the physical building itself safer. And then outside of schools, you've got to work on responsible gun ownership. You've got to work on responsible, gun policy, where it's much more difficult to get access to guns, particularly assault rifles. So all of that has got to be, part of that conversation in order to really make schools safer. And then the third, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, and I was going to just say the third question that you asked, school safety, teachers, and then, student discipline. Again, another spider web, right? But student discipline, or the way that we measure student discipline, is tied up in our school report card. And that's part of the problem, is because schools are graded on that report card, which, of course, affects property taxes, based on number of suspensions and expulsions. Schools are more likely to lessen the discipline because of that. And it's not, and it's the number of incidences. So let's say that Lisa Ells is a troublemaker in school, right? I never was, but let's say that I was. And, she is one student, but she keeps getting suspended 5 times. That is listed as 5 incidences rather than one student. And so I think our measurement of student discipline is not as valid as we can make it. But I think part of that is that push to, we can't show that our school is not safe, so we're not going to deal with the students who are repeat offenders, right? I always tell my student council members, I'm like, there's 5% of students that are going to come in and always do the right thing, and there's 5% of students that are going to come in and just always do the wrong thing, and then you've got that 90% in the middle that, depending on the day, they're going to make good choices or bad choices. And so, we need to address that 5% that is really struggling to make the good choices and focus on them to really help our student discipline, help our teachers, enforce it and be successful, and then create that positive learning environment.
Okay, we have Mr. Don Frierson. He's a local talk show host here in the city of Columbia, and I've asked him to send me some questions that I could have you to answer. And he said, "What are your thoughts on CRT?"
Okay, if we're talking about CRT, that is critical race theory, that is not something that is covered in our K through 12 academic standards. And I think that CRT has sort of gotten lumped in with factual history, all of that. Here's what I will say. I believe that we should be teaching all of history. I think that we should, in our English classes, we should be reading books and novels and nonfiction that represent all different perspectives in our schools, in our world. Because again, like I said earlier, we are preparing our students for a world that is outside of K through 12, a world that is still evolving. And we need to give them the tools and the perspectives to deal with people who are different from them. I talk about how our world is a beautiful place because we are different from each other, because we all come from a different perspective. And I don't feel like our past, I think about my own journey through learning. And it was particularly in history, it was a very whitewashed perspective that I was given. And so I think that we need to make sure that all of perspectives in terms of history are being taught to our students, that again, they see themselves in what we're teaching, they see their identity in there, because what we need to be preparing them for is going through, and here's all of the information you have. Now let's think critically through what you actually believe and why you believe it. And so I think that is what we need to be focusing on, and making sure, again, that our students are prepared for the world in the future that is different than the world we live in right now.
Okay, Mr. Frierson said, how can South Carolina schools overcome the educational gaps caused by COVID-19?
I think, one of the things we need to realize about the academic gaps with COVID-19 is that the entire world was dealt with COVID-19. And so when we talk about the fact that there was learning loss in our entire world, some places worse than the United States. And so, we've got to stop comparing our COVID students to what it was like prior to COVID, because it's not fair to them. It's not fair because they are always going to be those COVID students. And so while we are working very hard to get them, I don't like to use the word caught up, because I think that through COVID, students learned so much that wasn't necessarily book learning, as I like to talk about, but they learned, the impact of people's actions. They learned grit. They learned about loss, right? They learned about, just really completely thinking what you know about something and then finding out it's completely different than what you expected. And so, I know our teachers right now are working hard, but we've also got to make sure that, more importantly than academic loss, that we're addressing their social and mental loss. That was one of the things that really hurt students, was the lack of socialization that we count on so much for schools, and social, maturation and being around each other. And we think about, us as human beings, we are a very social animal. And so that isolation really led to, just higher incidences of mental health issues, higher incidences of just depression and anxiety. And so that, to me, is what I really want us to focus on, because the academics, we'll get that figured out. It's the other pieces that will be so impactful in a student's journey in their life that I want to make sure that we're on the right track for, because everybody lost academically through COVID.
I have a question about guidance counselors. I guess that's still the correct word. At least that's what they were.
I have been corrected. They're school counselors now.
Okay, school counselors. I think in each school there need to be at least 3, because you have so many students that's mentally challenged. Not anything wrong with them mentally, but they have problems at home. They have things they can't talk to their parents about. And one person is not going to cut it. I think they need, just like they bring in counselors when someone get killed or a school shooting, I think there need to be 3 to 5 counselors, not somebody just there holding a job, but somebody who really is there to listen. Somebody grades start dropping. There was an A student. Find the root of it. It's a problem somewhere. It's a problem. You can't overload that one school counselor. You got to have more. They got to know that there's somebody at school that care. What they may not have a parent that care about them at home. What are your thoughts on that?
I completely agree. I think that they have, again, they're sticking with a state law or a state ratio that is from 30, 40, 50 years ago, where you just had, a different society, right? And so I think right now the ratio of school counselors to students is supposed to be 1 to 450 students, and that is ridiculously too big of a ratio. Because that, I mean, again, it goes back to knowing your students and building those relationships. So you, like you said, you are aware, of a student who was doing great, and then all of a sudden is not. You know what's going on. That's why the impact of smaller class sizes with teachers. So you can really pay attention to what students are dealing with, because you're exactly right. Our students come into the building, with all different issues that they're dealing with, whether it be, their parents are going through a divorce, or they've lost a family member. That was one of the big things with COVID, was students just kept losing family members because we weren't doing a great job of mitigating the pandemic. They may not have had enough to eat that morning, or nothing to eat that morning, or they may haven't slept well because there was their younger sister or brother was crying in the room next door. All of these issues come into play. And we, as the adults in the building, need to be able to recognize when that's going on, and be able to intervene. And you've got to do that. You've got to have smaller numbers to be able to do that. I think that, what school counselors are expected to do just in the academics alone eats up so much of their time, talking about sort of that paperwork that is, not necessary, that they don't necessarily have the time to meet with students just to talk about, how your day is going, or, what do you need help with? And, to a greater extent, that's the issues with mental health counselors and psychologists. I worked in a middle school where the mental health counselor came Tuesdays from 9 to 12 and Thursdays from 12 to 3. And the joke was, well, you can't have a crisis on a Wednesday because there's nobody here to help you. We should have full-time mental health counselors in every school, because again, that's what our children are dealing with. You add in, the high stakes testing, and you're creating anxiety in students as young as, third grade, second grade, because of the pressure of those tests. And that's stuff that we haven't had to deal with before, because it didn't exist prior to this generation of students.
Wow. Do you believe there's enough parental transparency in the public schools?
When I don't know that I understand what parental transparency means. If that's talking about, do parents have access to what's going on in schools? I absolutely do think we have plenty. Again, I said earlier, I've worked in 4 schools over 22 years, and every school has always begged for the adults in the family to be a part of their students' lives. We have meet and greet, we have open house, we have I know elementary schools do spaghetti suppers or hot dog suppers. My school last week, during the quarter change, we had where parents of freshman students could come in and talk with their teachers and get sort of an academic review of what was going on and how to help their students. Every school has a school improvement council that is a big part of parents, where they can come in and be a part of that. I think every elementary and middle school has a PTO, a parent teacher organization. We as teachers, or as schools, we beg for parents to come in and volunteer, or be, classroom readers for the classroom, or come in and talk about their career. So I think there's lots of opportunities for parents to be involved, even to the point of approving state standards, academic standards. There's always an open forum for the community to come in and, give feedback on those state standards. So I think that there's lots of opportunities for parents to be a part of their students' lives. They just maybe have not been well publicized in the past. I don't know. I know that we try to get our parents in all the time.
Yes. Now, this is a very sensitive question. How do you think LGBTQ community should be educated? Do you believe a separate school established for them, or should it be an integrated community? This is a very sensitive issue. That's the response. That's the question somebody just wrote.
Okay. I think that our LGBT community deserves to be accepted like anybody else in the schools. I don't think that separate is the right answer at all. Again, because we are preparing students for a life where they're going to encounter all different types of people, all different types of perspectives, and we as a public school system need to prepare them for that. And to me, that is a very adult problem. I work in a public school with 2,100 students. We have all different races. We have all different LGBTQ community people, and they all get along. I can remember last year when there was the push against the Save Women's Sports Act, and a student came up to me. He knew that I was really an advocate for, students. And he said, Miss Ellis, I don't understand what the big deal about what your orientation is. And I was like, right, because to you, it's not a big deal. Like, we're putting adult problems on students that don't exist for them because they are much more open to who you are. And it's very much a, hey, you do you, I'll be me, and we're going to be fine. And it doesn't, just because somebody is different from you doesn't mean that they are less than in any way, or you are greater than in any way. It's just who we are. And the sooner we accept people for who they are and what they want to be, the more beautiful this world becomes.
Okay, now my question is, I'm going to lead from that. Teachers get to school around what time, and then they leave around what time?
Well, it honestly depends on, what level you're teaching. I know elementary schools, they often start as early as 7 o'clock in the morning. My high school, we start at 8:50. And so it's anywhere from 7, they'll get done in terms of meeting with students, 2:30. I get done at 4. In terms of meeting with students, but most teachers aren't able to leave that early.
So they got to meet with students, then they got to prepare the work for the next day, and then they got to grade papers. Or do they still do that?
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the things that we talk about, when I get to the school and my campaign team, who has been awesome, but my campaign manager has never been a teacher. And she's like, what do you mean you can't check your text message during the day? And I'm like, I am with students all day from the moment I get to school. And I usually get to school about a little bit after 8:10 until I leave. And the earliest I think I have left all year has been maybe 4:15, 4:30. And that's because I've been running to do a campaign thing. But teachers are either staying late to have that quiet time to do grading or do lesson planning, or they're taking it home because they have families or other jobs, and then they're doing it, late at night. But I think SC for Ed did a study 3 years ago about, your extra hours that you worked. And we looked at over the course of the school year that teachers worked an extra 20 to 25 hours per week, just to make sure that they were not falling so far behind.
Wow.
And that doesn't include, there's schools where your other duties is assigned. You have to attend, PTO meetings, or you have to attend faculty meetings, or you have to, help run the gate at sporting events. Like, there's all of these other things that teachers and adults in schools are expected to do as part of their contract.
Okay. Don said, what are your thoughts on school equity? I mean, schools in poor districts not receiving the same funding because of lower tax base.
Absolutely. I believe that every student deserves a high quality education regardless of their zip code. And I think that, we really have to look at our school funding formula to make sure that they're getting the funding that they need. One of my dad's colleagues years ago said, you tax where the wealth is and you educate where the child is. And so I don't think that South Carolina has done a really great job of providing our more rural school districts with the funding that they need to meet the needs of those students. I'll be honest with you. I have done, a little bit of work on looking at the new school funding formula where it takes the EFA and changes it to state aid to classrooms. And I think that it's a good start. But I think we really have to pay attention to making sure that those local areas that don't have the local funding, places like Williamsburg, places like Abbeville, that is being offset by the state funding. We need to sort of take federal funding out of the equation because that's so specific, but our state funding has got to make up to make sure that our students, and it shouldn't be equal across the state, right? Because it takes different amounts of money to educate different types of students, but it should be equitable. So if you've got students who, if you've got a school district that is higher in poverty, where we know that it takes more money to, to meet the needs of those students, because you're talking about lunches, you're talking about transportation, you're talking about, access to opportunities, they should have that amount of money that they need for those students to be successful. And so I think we've definitely got to do more work on the school funding formula, but then the General Assembly also has to honor it. And they haven't fully funded education based on their own state law since 2008.
Wow. So what happened to those students when they were out of school with COVID in those rural areas that didn't have internet? How did they get their work?
Well, I think probably what a lot of the school districts did was create packets, paper packets that they would come and pick up. But, that was one of the things that, again, you talk about infrastructure and broadband internet access to high-speed internet is no longer a perk. That should be part of our infrastructure. And so that's one of the things that I think the state has done some forward moving work on, but needs to move a lot quicker. And, not even just for our students, but we talk about how much our workforce changed through COVID, where you had, more and more businesses looking at working from home or, able to work remotely. And so those businesses should be making sure that those communities have access to, high speed broadband. To me, that is not just an education issue. That is a workforce issue as well, and one that our state should be prioritizing, again, to make sure that our students have, access to the materials and the stuff that they need to be successful. One of the things that school districts are moving away from are the snow days, right? Which is funny in South Carolina because we get, an ice day every once in a while.
Right.
And moving it to asynchronous or e-learning days. And that's great if you're in a district that has really strong internet access. But, I'm in Richland too, which is in, sort of Northeast Columbia, and there's still pockets there that have weak internet access. So to me, that is, again, an equity issue that the state needs to really focus on addressing, but not only for our education, but to encourage, our businesses and workforce to come to South Carolina.
Okay, I got a long one here. I used to be a volunteer in schools. It's just some kids that's very hard to catch than the other. More kids needs lots of one-on-one learning. I think more parents need to attend their kids' school. Lots of teachers are reaching back out to parents regarding their kids' grades. It's only when report cards goes out. I remember when I was in school, we took a lot of trips. When we got back, we was graded on questions to get the grade for that class. Oh, let's see. Now I got to get back. Okay, I got it. I got it. There we go. So do you want to address that?
Sure. I think that there's some really great points in that statement in question. One of the things that I talk about is the communication between parents and teachers and schools. And as we have moved into this age of technology, it used to, when I first started teaching, I was still using a paper grade book, right? And so now everything is electronic and it's web-based. So I put in a grade and parents and students can see it immediately, to the point where the other day our guidance department was dealing with paper report cards. And I made the comment, why are we still sending home paper report cards? Because, our power school is what our system is. Our grades, it's the expectation of the teacher to update grades weekly. And so, you can know where your student is anytime you log in to see it. And so, I think that's one of the things that has shifted just in my own career as a teacher, is that access to grades, for better or for worse, for students and parents. But I think that having that conversation is so key. And, I'll be honest with you. I have had parents where I have called to say, little, I don't know, Johnny is not doing so well. And parents have said, oh my gosh, we will take care of it. You won't have any other trouble with him. And then I've had other parents where I've called and said, little Johnny isn't doing so well. And it was very much well, what are you doing to fix the problem, rather than holding little Johnny accountable? And so I do think that teachers are a little bit wary because you don't know which reaction you're going to get. But at the same time, that parent as the partner is so important in helping that student be successful. And then I think the last thing she talked about was, going on field studies and field trips. And that's one of the things that I believe so strongly in. Particularly in your areas, your areas that don't have that same access to opportunity. The problem that we have run into now is the lack of funding. And so, when you think about last school year, our schools were underfunded $700 per student. The funding to pay for field trips has dried up, because that funding has had to go to, the necessities. And so one of the things that if we can get our schools funded properly, then that allows us to be able to do more field studies where kids have access to those experiences and those opportunities to then help them, when they're back in school learning, to have sort of what we call the context clues. When you're talking about the beach, and you have students that have never been to the beach, never set their toes in the sand at the water and felt the tide coming in and out. That's a very different experience than just reading about it in a book.
Absolutely. Ms. Hopkins said, what do you see as a primary work of the Board of Education?
That's a great question. I think the Board of Education is there to oversee school districts, to make sure that they are doing what they are supposed to be doing and providing that quality education for their students. I think that part of their role is to interpret, state and federal law, to make sure that we are doing what is best based on the state and federal law for our students, and figuring out, the most effective way to interpret that. And then, of course, keeping up with the research on best practices in teaching, and making sure that they are supporting how we teach our students, because it is very different than it used to be. And yet, we're still doing a lot of the things the way that we did 30, 40, 50 years ago. I was talking with some people the other day about our high school requirements, that we're still requiring pre-calculus and algebra 3 and all of these maths that really are not necessarily what students need to take to be successful in their lives. And we're doing that because in the 60s, we wanted to put a man on the moon. And so, I think there's lots of ways that we can, pull our public education system into the 21st century, because we're already well into the 21st century.
Now, I had to laugh, and I'm going to get to the next question, because some of this work I see these kids doing, some that I see in the 3rd grade that I see them doing, I said, what is this? If I had children now, they would have to get a tutor, because to me, that work is hard. That work is hard.
Well, it is. And, one of the things that I have noticed just in talking with teachers across the state is that the standards are not developmentally appropriate to compare to the brain development that we have of our students. And that's something else that we need to look at. When we talk about text dependent analysis in the 1st grade, that is not at all where students are developmentally appropriate. They are literally just learning how to read, and they don't need to be doing text dependent analysis. And so, I think that's one of the other things that we need to look at is, are our state standards developmentally appropriate for our students? Because if they're not, then you're setting the students up for failure, and you're setting the teacher up for failure, because the students aren't ready to handle that material.
I mean, I said, well, maybe I just might be a little slow, but I said, how can they know so much at a young age?
Yeah.
Their brain can't take but so much,
No,
but that just might be me. But we got another question. Why are so many teachers leaving the workplace? If elected, how could you change that?
So our teachers are leaving for 2 reasons: low salary and working conditions. And so, we've got to address the salary. We've got to continue to address that. That is a General Assembly, a budget bill. And it has increased over the last, 3-4 years, but not at the level that it needs to, because there were about 7 or 8 years where there was no salary increase. And when you talk about, cost of living or inflation, I at year 17 was bringing home less money than I was at year 1, because my salary had not kept up. I think the other thing we need to realize about teacher salaries is we're no longer competing against education alone. We're competing against every other profession that exists out there. And so if you take my own personal circumstances, where I have 2 master's degrees and 22 years experience, when I compared that to somebody in the private industry that had the same education and level of experience, I would be making $40,000 to $50,000 more a year. And so, if you're talking about a teacher who loves chemistry and their option is to become a chemistry teacher and start at $40,000, or work at Nephron or, another pharmaceutical lab, or a chem lab, and make double that and not have to deal with teenagers, for some, that's a no-brainer, right? You're going to go after the money. And so we've got to address salary and look at it differently. The second piece is working conditions. And that is, we've got to take things off teachers' plates. We've got to look at what we're asking teachers to do, and is it helpful to students? How is what this task is, how is that in the best interest of students? And if we can't answer that with a clear and concise answer, teachers don't need to be doing it. And so that's how I think that we recruit. I think we've also got to look at lowering class sizes. I can't tell you how many teachers who have left teaching, but have said to me, I will come back in a heartbeat if you can guarantee that I will have no more than 18 first graders in a classroom. And so to me, there's not a shortage of teachers in South Carolina. There's a shortage of teachers that are willing to work under these conditions for this salary.
What do the average teacher for the first year start out with? Salary?
So the starting salary for a first year teacher is $40,000. It just increased this year to $40,000. And so, that's with a bachelor's degree, no years experience. There are districts that pay higher than that. So that is the minimum that a district has to pay.
Okay.
But, you know, when you can go down the street to the new Buc-ee's in Florence and make $48,000 as an assistant manager.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. Someone said they think the money is money, which you just said, and more money is going to our sports education. So, can you explain the responsibilities of the school board next? How can a school board know if the goals are being accomplished and its policies are being implemented?
That's a great question, because the school board has such a big impact on that school district, those schools, and those teachers. You know, the responsibility of the school board is to oversee the superintendent of that school district and the budget. And so, you know, as well as developing policy or implementing policy that comes down from the board, from the State Board of Education or the Department of Education, and of course, state and federal law. I always think that it's important to pay attention to, and particularly in this day and age, to the retention of your teachers. Are your teachers leaving your district in, you know, big amounts? And I think, you know, usually in a school or a district, you know, if you have maybe 5% turnover, that's going to be normal, right? Because people are going to be leaving, they're going to be retiring, you know, moving, those sort of things. But anything over that, and you really need to be looking at which schools have the high turnover, why your district has such high turnover, because, you know, when you look at how much it costs to onboard a new teacher, it is costing districts about $20,000 to bring in a new teacher and get them on board. And so when you think about, if you're losing 30% of your teachers from a school district each year, you know, times $20,000, that's a lot of money that is being wasted because you're not taking care of your employees. And so to me, the role of the school board is to make sure that the superintendent is doing, you know, what is right for the students and the teachers, and making sure that you are, you know, retaining your employees, and also, you know, using the money that you receive effectively, you know, and that you're being transparent and being held accountable, because there's a lot of money that flows into school districts, and, you know, you want to make sure that it's getting down into the classroom as much as it can.
Do you support private schools receiving public funding? What are your thoughts on school choice?
I absolutely do not support private schools receiving public funding. And the reason why is that they are not held to the same standards. Private schools or parochial schools, you know, they don't have to admit all students. They don't have to follow the same accountability, and they don't have to be transparent in how they're spending their money. I think that you know, school choice already exists. It exists in public school districts. It exists in the public charter school system. And so, you know, families have access to school choice. I think that we can really improve on that throughout our public school system. I would like, you know, for school districts to look at open enrollment across their district. So it's not necessarily just, oh, you're zoned for this school. You know, I would like for school districts to partner with each other. If, you know, one school district doesn't have the tools, or, you know, I think about a career and technology center, but the neighboring school district does, letting those students have access, you know, to that part. But, you know, the devil is always in the details, right? And how we iron that out. But I do think if our schools were properly funded, then we could expand school choice. We could include transportation in there, so it truly is equitable. And we could provide lots more opportunities for our students without them having to pay for it.
Mm-hmm. For those who are just joining, we're speaking with Miss Lisa Ells. She is a candidate for Superintendent of Schools for the state of South Carolina. As far as my opinion, I voted for you today.
Oh, thank you.
I voted for you today. You know, I've been listening to you. I've been watching you, and, you know, there's no other choice.
Well, I
There's
appreciate
no
that. Thank
choice
you.
for me. And I'm big on children getting help, the help that they need. We realize that the school system and the teachers, they can't do everything. It got to start at home. Got to have some home training. But in these last couple of minutes, we want you to use, if it takes you 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, sell yourself to all these people from South Carolina and tell them why should they vote for Linda Ellis.
Absolutely. First and foremost, I am not a politician. I am a school teacher. My goal is to, get elected to fix the system in 4 years and go back to the classroom, because that's where I am happiest, working with students and see them grow. Through my 22 years of education, I've seen the detrimental effects of bad policy. And so I think that as a teacher, I'm a natural problem solver. I listen to experts, and by putting that teacher voice or my teacher voice up at the policy level, we can really work to improve our public school system to make it where every child in South Carolina deserves access or has access to a high quality education. That is my goal. Every decision I make will be in asking, how is this in the best interest of students of South Carolina? And if that can't be answered clearly, then we're going to figure out another way to do it. Because ultimately, when we have a high quality education for our students, we lift all of South Carolina up.
Ms. Hopkins says, what can be done to improve student achievement and ensure everyone who graduates is college ready?
Student achievement, I think we've got to look at, again, making sure we've got highly qualified teachers in the classroom, making sure that our class sizes are smaller so students can get that individual attention. Student achievement is only successful if students are reading by the third grade. So those kindergarten, first and second grade classes are so important to make sure that their classes are small, that you've got a quality teacher in there teaching them how to read. And then I think we've also got to look at how we're measuring student achievement. I don't think that with our high stakes testing, we're actually measuring the growth of students. And that's something else that I want to look at, because the data shows that, while our students are learning, because they are taking, a biased test or a high intensity test one day of the year, that it's not demonstrating their growth throughout that year. So I think we can measure differently and better.
Let's see. I understand the responsibilities of the superintendent, but I'm big on parents to get in your role too and stay there. The teacher isn't there to raise your children, they're there to teach them.
You're right as rain, Miss Smith. You're right as rain. It's a partnership. The parents are the first teachers for children, and they, their role in their students' growth is so important. But we need to all be working together. We need to hold the student responsible for their learning. We need to hold the teacher responsible, and we need to hold the adults responsible.
Wow. Good. This has been so good. And it's things that we need to know. And I wanted people to have the opportunity to hear you. So when they go to the polls, it won't be no question. Won't be no question. We know who we need. Everybody on social media, pass Miss Linda Ellis' name, pass it along so she can get elected, because we need her. We need her for our children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, cousins. We need them for the teachers. The school system need help. Don't criticize what you don't know is going on. Yeah. If you've never been in the system, parents, if you never go to PTO meetings, then you really don't have a voice, because you need to go to PTO meetings and see what your child is doing. That child that's home, sometimes it's not that child that's at school. It's a different child. And we need to pop up on our children sometimes in school, see what they are doing. And just like Miss Smith said, don't leave it to the teachers. Don't leave it to the teachers. You got to do your part at home too. Make sure they do their homework. Don't let them come home and get on that iPad or that cell phone. Make them sit at the dinner table and tell that you may not understand. It might be like, if I had children and they were sitting down telling me I'm doing ABC, I wouldn't know what they would be talking about, but I would be listening at what they were saying. And that's what we need to do, because, the teacher can only do so much. The teacher can only do, and we commend every educator, not just the teachers, but the janitors, the teachers' aides, everybody, security, because really, to be honest, I don't know if I could do that. I'm not called to do that. I don't have the patience to do that. So all those who work in the school system, kudos to you. Kudos to you. And many blessings to you. And I really pray that you win.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. Coleman. It's been such an honor to be on here. These were great questions, and I really appreciate the conversation and dialogue and the opportunity to meet and speak with your community. It has been great.
Now we have Mr. Fraser was on here, and if it's okay, I'm gonna give him your contact information because he wants to interview you on his show. Okay. So we thank you so very much for coming on tonight. And, hopefully on November the 8th, those numbers will be good enough to call you a winner. Now, when you win, we want you to come back.
Absolutely.
We want you to come back, and we want you to celebrate with us.
Absolutely.
Okay. And thank you so very much. You can go ahead and sign out if you want to.
Thank you. Y'all have a good evening.
All right. You too. This has been so wonderful, y'all. This, you may say, well, why? I don't have children. So why are you talking about this? Everybody know a child. Everybody got little cousins, and we need to help them. Those of you in South Carolina, we know many of you that's on tonight was not in South Carolina. But you can pass the word. Everybody knows somebody. And most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, please, ladies and gentlemen, November the 8th, vote. Don't wait. I went and voted today, and I was really encouraged because it was people was coming in, and I saw our young people. Because let me tell you something, especially I'm gonna talk to you Democratic. If we don't vote, what happened January 6th, I think it was 2021, it's gonna be a repeat. I think it was 2021, but y'all know what I'm talking about when they storm the Capitol. Get your cousins, your auntie, your nieces, your nephews, get as many people as you can. I put on my Facebook page today, I said, even if my candidates lose, I'm not a loser, I'm a winner because I went out and exercised my right to vote. That's the way we got to look at it. We got to think about them people who had them dogs sick on them, and them water hoses, and those that was killed and all that. And you going to tell me you're going to sit home and not vote? I am pleading with you all. Vote, vote, vote. Well, some people say, well, voting don't do no good. Yes, it do. It make you feel good in the inside because you said, I did my part. When you do your part, that's all you can do. That's all you can do is do your part. How you going to sit home and some of your ancestors, some of your family members was whipped, beaten, booze, and all of that because they wanted to right the vote. They wanted to right the vote. And we're going to sit at home? If you don't vote, you don't have a voice. That's right, Miss Virginia. Vote, vote, vote. That's right, Miss Sandra Sumter. Vote, vote, vote. We need, how we type. We hear some gossip and we say, ooh, let me text this to Sister Sue. Okay, text vote on November the 8th. Text early voting has started. I drove up today and got curbside service because I got a handicap sticker. And I just sit there because I had to wait for about 30 minutes. And I was just very impressed with what I see. But we can't stop. We can do it. We can do it, but we got to work together. Tell them, Miss Davenport. You tell them up there in New York to vote. And see, it's good. Excuse me. It's really good to do early voting because y'all know how we are. If it's pouring down rain next Tuesday, we say, I ain't going out there in that rain, get wet. But see, you're going to see Caucasian, they're going to be out there whether it's raining, sleeting, or snowing. and you know how you are. So if you think you check the weather, and if you think it's gonna be 10 degrees, if it's gonna be snowing, if it's gonna be raining, then you need to go vote early. Cause we need your vote. It's a mess up there, y'all. And you think there's food shortages and gas shortages and all that. If you don't go out and vote, it's many people gonna be without jobs. Many people see, well, I better not say that. But when I was coming up, we survived. We could take lima beans and some rice, and my mama could do some biscuits, and we was okay. So we knew how to survive during hard times. But those of you who have not experienced the cornbread fritters and syrup and fat bite because that's all you had to eat, you better get out and vote. I'm telling you. All you got to do is watch Fox News and CNN, and you'll see everything you need to say. And that don't make you vote. See, it's okay what you do in your personal time, but you need to start listening to some of these news things. You need to start listening to some of these politicians and what their plans are, because they don't have you in mind. They don't have you in their equation. Some of them don't. Some of them don't. And I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, we can do it. We got power to do it. We got Obama elected 2 years back to back because he was the first African American. That's why many of us voted. We need to pretend that a lot of these people is the same way so we can go out and vote for them. Now, don't expect any politician to work a miracle. You can't work a miracle in 1 year, in 2 years. I hear some people talking about President Biden. He can't undo all that stuff Trump did. He can't undo all that in 1 year, in 2 years. He can't undo all that in 4 years. And we sitting back talking about, what is he doing? He ain't doing that. No, he got to undo some of that stuff that was done. And we so hard, and we talk about what he ain't done. If we don't go out and vote, we ain't even got a right to give our opinion about nothing. I wouldn't want to be a politician. That's why I'm for those who are politicians, because a politician and a pastor, I wouldn't want to be, because you have people always saying what they should do, and they ain't doing what they're supposed to do themselves. How you going to talk about a pilot? But how you going to talk about a politician, anything, and you don't vote? I remember those days. It very stressful, hard, even on my own. Over the years, we think we're going through hard. We think we're going through hard time. We better pay attention, and we better get out and vote. We think we having hard time. Somebody said, "Well, my God will take care of me." He will. He will take care of you, but he give us means. He give us laws of the land. If you don't vote, you don't have a voice. You got that right, Miss Martha. And I'm gonna plead this, and I'm gonna edit this tape, and I'm gonna let it run from now until November the 8th. Vote, people. Y'all vote. Get them family members that's talking that yang yang. And when they start talking that yang yang, you brought up some of the things that y'all had to go through. Listen, I told the people the other day when we was on here, I remember having them 2 pair of pants and that 2 blouses, and have to wash the ones I wore on Monday so I could wear them again on Wednesday. See, that's what I'm talking about. Because we didn't have, and see, we didn't have the rights that we have now. We got the rights. We just got to get out and vote. I put a thing on my page today where we used to get apple, orange candy, and nuts for Christmas because that's all our parents could afford. Well, we have we have been tremendously blessed, but all that can be taken away in less than 1 vote that's needed if you stay home and don't vote. If you stay home and don't vote. Marching is good, Miss Davenport, but marching with no action is nothing. You got to march, and then you got to have action. I asked myself, where are the young people that when George Floyd got killed, God bless his dead, and they started the Black Lives Matter movement? They needed to start a voting movement. Young people draw young people. Voting movement. Yo, that's what we need. There's power in our vote. Do you not know we could get just about anything we wanted if we, as a people, if we would get out and vote? But we criticize. We sit home. We criticize. This one ain't doing that. That one ain't doing that. Well, what are you doing? What are you doing? What, do you even go to community meetings to know what's going on? You say your senator, your councilman, your this, that is doing nothing. How you know what they're doing and you don't even go to a community meeting? Oh my God. It's tight, but it's right because we need to do better. Listen, if you forgot what our ancestors went through, just go and Google and key in Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King and some other people and see what they went through for us. Or put the thing in there, Black History, and see what they went through. If you go in there and you put that in Google, you see everything, there ain't nowhere in the world you can sit home on November 8th and not vote. Because sacrifices was made for you. Sacrifices was made with me. Make your vote count. When I walked, well, I didn't walk because I was in the car. When I left there today, I was just as happy. I do care who win, but if my person don't win, I'm still going to be happy because I did my part. But I tell you one thing I'm going to do, I'm going to hold them accountable. I am going to hold them accountable. I'm not afraid. You get on there and you say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. I'm going to print. I can go to Google on every speech and put it in there. You said on this date, you were going to do this. You said on that date, you were going to do that. We got to hold them accountable. We got to hold them accountable. So I ask all of y'all who tune in tonight, get as many people to go out and vote as possible. Those of you in Georgia, there's no reason Herschel Walker should win. Those of you in Georgia, no reason Stacey Abrams shouldn't win. No reason. But you know what? You got to get out and vote. You may not live there, but you know somebody live there. And when they start talking about, oh, this vote, no, you preach to them like I'm preaching to you. Bring it home to them. Say, do you want it to be where your children riding down the road and you don't know if they're going to get home because you found them somewhere hanging on a tree? Come on now. I can't say too much about that because Facebook cut me off. But truth is the truth. The truth is the truth. You know, we got to think about these things. Let me read this and then I go. March to the polls and take your family and friends. I early voted and I took a friend that would not have been able to get out and vote. Everybody, everywhere, please vote. And if you know a senior citizen that can't get out and vote, absentee ballots, or if they can get in a wheelchair, they'll bring the thing to them. They'll bring the thing outside to them. They'll bring the thing where they can vote. And I'm telling you, we need you, and we're better together instead of being against each other. We're better together. We're better together. We're better together. So thank you so very much. I'll be back tomorrow night, and I'm going to try and get another guest on here that's running because, you know, knowledge is power. If we don't know, then we don't know. But I'm gonna try to use this platform for the right thing. You're correct. I'm in New Jersey, but I have family living in South. Oh, where is that at? In Philadelphia? Is it in Philadelphia where Dr. Oz is trying to run? I was totally surprised at him. I ain't gonna never watch him on TV no more. He done lost me. All that stuff he been saying. See, that's the kind of thing. We got to read up on what these people is saying and doing. You know, I could do a debate. I wish I could get in touch with Herschel Walker because I could ask him some questions on platform and he wouldn't have a clue what I was talking about. And I wish I could get in touch with him because I would bring him on here and ask him questions because he don't know nothing about no politics. I probably know more about politics than he do because I follow it. I be on Facebook and all that. I just don't be on there posting scriptures. I'll be on there seeing what's going on because I want to be in the know. Okay, everybody. If I start talking that, I'll be on here from 9 to 11 o'clock. But thank you so very much for joining us. It's been a blessing. Tune in tomorrow. We always have something good. You may say, well, I'm not in South Carolina, but you're in your state. And you can take the things you hear on this platform and use it in your state. Have a good night, everybody. This has been real